Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live program for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders. And these are live conversations, as I like to say. These conversations are unrehearsed and unpredictable. Actually, I had LinkedIn and I started hearing myself. I had to turn that off. I am unbelievably excited for today's conversation. The gentleman I have today, he's actually no stranger to this community. He has been a regular poster on LinkedIn, if I can use that term, with some very insightful content. In fact, I told him just a moment ago, he's wise beyond his years. Mr. Semir Jahic is the Senior Manager of Sales Engineering and Operations for EMEA with Clari. And he joins us today. We're going to talk about the AESE partnership. We're going to talk about emphasizing value. We may talk a little bit about getting the technical win or focusing too much on the technical win. And more than anything, we're going to pick apart something he said to me a couple weeks ago when we chatted, when he said, Chris, we can't sell the way we did 2 years ago. Semir, my friend, welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Chris. Very well. Appreciate you having me here on the show today. Yes, like you said, I'm at Clari. I lead the SE team, the charge here in Europe as we're expanding, and very passionate about everything pre-sales and the B2B software industry. So excited to be here today with you.
Well, very excited. By the way, we've already got our first comment. My friend David Rhodes. David, good to see you. Folks, we do not see you out there. So if you'd like to say hello, please do so. Let us know that you're out there. If you have any questions for Semir, please do so as well. A few more coming in. Ron Whitson. Ron was a guest on the show a few weeks ago. Ron, nice to see you, my friend. Semir, actually, before we get too far into it, I have to just say, a hearty good morning to some of my, U.S. colleagues. As you know, yesterday was the Super Bowl, and that's sort of a big deal. Everybody thinks that the Monday after the Super Bowl should be a holiday. So to those of you who are Kansas City fans, congratulations. To those of you, I've got some friends that like Philadelphia, obviously. So sorry for the tough loss. This feels a little bit like the Super Bowl of LinkedIn conversations because you've got so much to bring. Semir, in the unlikely event the folks who might be listening live or in recording don't know you, do you mind just sharing a little bit of your background and how you actually got into sales engineering?
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. Like many, I've stumbled into it. I didn't even know it existed when I graduated or even after I was working. So the story started, you kind of at university thinking about exciting jobs you could do. Like many, I maybe landed in the tech consulting job at Accenture. That was cool. And I had a lot of things I enjoyed and some things I didn't enjoy. And I always tried to do more of what I enjoy. And I was explaining to a friend of mine what that was. It was customer interactions, figuring out a solution to the problem, mapping things out. And he said, you should become a solutions engineer or sales engineer. I said, what's that? And he explained to me what it is. And he was at Salesforce at that time. And I said, well, that's amazing. That sounds pretty cool. And there's no test, deploy, and hypercare and these kinds of things. Like, no, that's fabulous. I want to do this. And that's how I got into sales engineering. And my first role was at Salesforce for a few years. And then I joined Clari to help build the international business over here in Europe, and been the first SE on the ground, and now I've built an SE team, and we keep growing the company over here.
That's fabulous. By the way, a few other folks are chiming in. Yaweri, I hope I'm saying that right. Thanks for joining. Frank Ivy, he's a regular guest in the audience, if I can use that. Frank, nice to see you. Semir, you posted something on LinkedIn recently, which was the story of how you actually got the job with Clari. I'm inspired to have you share that with our audience because I think there's a great lesson to be learned, maybe a couple lessons to be learned there.
Yeah, I mean, like many of these things, it's only in hindsight you see the impact of some of the things you try. So yes, I posted on LinkedIn recently, and yeah, feel free to connect on LinkedIn with me, no problem at all. Would be happy to connect. Yes, a few years ago when I was at Salesforce, I was always keen to understand the industry like I do today. I follow the news, I listen to podcasts, and I listened to a podcast on, I think it was the SaaStr podcast. That's where I heard of Clari the first time and followed the company. And at one point, this must have been like 6-9 months later, I thought, you know what, this is a pretty cool company. I see them on LinkedIn, on Twitter, in the news. They seem to be growing and doing the right thing. And, if they ever come to Europe, I want to be part of this, journey with them. And what I ended up doing was just on LinkedIn, I literally sent the CEO a note. And this was not like a sales navigator in-mail fancy. It was just simply the personalized invite, 140 characters. And I said something along the lines of, if you ever expand into Europe, I'd love to be part of that journey. Hope I can hear back from you. Best Semir. And, he came back to me, the CEO, and I got in touch with some of their teams and we started talking, and it took some time for them to be ready to expand in Europe. But when the time came, I joined, and that's how that journey started. So it was all about taking shots, long shots. I mean, I was a sales engineer at Salesforce in London. He was a CEO in Silicon Valley of his company. Why would he reply? But then again, I had nothing to lose, and it worked out fantastically in the end.
Were you intimidated to reach out to him before you actually sent that message?
I might have been earlier in my career, and I got progressively less intimidated by things like that because the worst thing that can happen is just like the LinkedIn connection request sits there pending, and if you're okay with that, you'll be fine. And so today I always think about what's the worst that could happen, and with things like that, you can really only win. And just don't get bothered by the rejection or the lack of a response, and you'll be fine. And in this case, it turned out fantastically, I think, hopefully for both sides. I mean, I've been enjoying it at Clari for sure.
I'm quite certain they're very happy to have you. That's just my hunch. Well, and I think you mentioned that it was a personal, you sort of reached out in a very sort of personal manner, right? It was very realistic. It was very authentic. And just the fact you said, hey, if you guys are ever thinking about, or if you get to the point where you're expanding into Europe, would love to be a part of that journey. I just think it's such a non-threatening and sincere way to reach out to someone and begin to build a relationship. So I think there's a lot to be learned there. Incidentally, Semir, I don't know if you can see the questions. Jim Gordon says hello.
Jim?
I'm inspired to bring Yauri, and I hope I'm saying that right. He asked a question. What do you think of RPA development skills as a sales engineer to understand? So let's pick that apart a little bit and broaden it a little bit, and then we'll ask or we'll address Yauri's questions a little bit more directly. Let's just talk about skills for a sales engineer, someone who maybe is trying to break in and hasn't yet. What would you say to that individual in terms of the skills that they should be developing?
I think there's a variety of skills that sales engineers bring to the table, and successful ones especially. It all goes to, communication skills, presentation skills, the ability to build trust with your stakeholders. And, these are very common traits. You'll see those, LinkedIn and posts or on, guides for careers. These are quite basics, foundational skills that will make you successful SE. But I think there's also a few things that maybe not as straightforward or not as obvious, which is, one is the ability to be resilient in your learning, I think, because you'll fail as a sales engineer a lot of times because there's new technology you have to learn, and you'll not succeed at a demo. You might have to come back from a lost deal, like a lot of things that sales reps also have to manage. I think resilience is one. And then the other thing is, with everybody I hired, I think what they share as a trait, and even everybody I talk to, is they're all lifelong learners in one way or another. It doesn't always show as obviously as getting certifications on a certain technology or something like that, but it might be somebody who's brewing beer in his free time and is learning about all the various ways of doing that, or part of something else, building something from the ground up. And that's, I think, a common trait across many SEs. And of course, there's technical skills too, right? Because you're sales engineers, solution consultants, whatever terminology you use. A lot of these can be learned. I mean, I've seen people go into sales engineering from dancing, teachers, florists, honestly, like from all walks of life. And I've seen SEs go on do many things different from SE. And yeah, I think it's one of those amazing careers where, you just got to find the right fit with your company. And if you can provide value to that company, and it's going to be mutually beneficial, and it could be a fantastic career journey.
Yeah, no, really well said. And, I'm inspired to pick apart some of what you said. The first things you said were communication skills, the ability, presentation skills, right? The ability to build trust. And you also talked about technical skills. I always put them into three buckets, right? We have to have some technical skills, period, right? You have to have, as I like to say, some technical chops, whether that's industry knowledge, a specific. So I think, Yari, the question was on RPA. Look, if you want to get into, process automation, robotic process automation, then yes, those are skills you'd have to have, right? Now, are they the only skills to have? Of course not. But then the second bucket is people skills. And you mentioned trust, right? It's the ability. And how do we build trust? We listen, we show an interest and a curiosity in the people that we're dealing with. We're authentic, right? But then there's the third bucket is the sales skills, right? And a lot of that comes with the ability to present, the ability to listen, the ability to do some discovery and determine how does our solution fit within, their environment. So some really good words there. I'm inspired to bring up what Jim said a moment ago. The constant for SEs is change, and you mentioned being resilient. We need to be, we need to have some grit, right? I mean, this could be a very unforgiving profession, particularly in light of working with our sales counterparts. And I know that's one of the things that was something that's sort of, quote, high on your list of things to talk about. Let's pick that apart a little bit. Talk about your experience with working with your AE counterparts or your sales counterparts. What are some of the lessons you've learned and some of the advice that you give now to the people that are in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a good topic. I think one of my favorite topics, sort of the AE SE partnership, that dynamic duo. And I've a few months ago asked people in various positions, from CROs at public listed companies down to individual contributors, what they think matters the most in succeeding in winning deals. And for many that have these two functions, it's how well those two functions work together. It's not how great the product is. It's not how amazing your product marketing is. It's not your methodology and sales that differentiates. It's really how well do these two work together, that duo, that makes the deal make or break. And I think since then, I've really started to learn a bit more about the different skill sets involved and how you can create good trust between those two and create great working relationships. And the thing is, it varies hugely. In my career, I think, I started at Salesforce, then I was here now. I talked to many, many SEs and AEs. And what I really don't like to see is like that friction or that tension between, like the sort of unhealthy sometimes. Oh, my AE just dropped another demo on my calendar. Or the other way around. My SE is never around, always pushing back. I have to sell the deal to the SE before I get a demo. That's not great either. So I see that, and I absolutely don't like that. I think we're part of the same team. Hopefully, we're incentivized with our comp plans to drive the same behaviors, like generating revenue or whatever the key metric might be. So with the aligned incentives, I think you can already create a better collaboration. Then, as a leader, and for the leaders listening, it's really how you work with your sales leader, because I think that sets the tone for then how your teams will behave with each other, amongst each other. And I've just spent so much time with my sales leaders, meet them regularly, talk to them at any time. We're really thought partners. I'm not a resource. Oh, I need a demo. I talk to the SC. I need a competitive analysis. I talk to the competitive team, whatever the case might be. It's really a partnership where we think through the territory, the teams, the deals, the accounts together. And I think that starts then to also cascade down, and the AEs and the SEs work more effectively together. And there's much more, many more tactics as well. But I think it starts with that, deep collaboration and creating that good relationship back and forth on the leadership level, and then it cascades down to the ICs.
Such an important point to make, Semir. And it's interesting hearing you say that so many companies, we focus so much on the messaging and the product marketing and the positioning but I do think we tend sometimes to overlook the AE-SE partnership, right? And a lot of times the challenge is, and you use the word friction. A lot of times it's friction, and oftentimes it's not necessarily overt friction. I work with a lot of organizations, and one of the first things I ask them when we begin to get to know each other a little bit is how well do AEs and SEs, get along? How well they collaborate? A lot of times they're like, oh yeah, all right, they get along great, right? But then you start to pick that apart a little bit, and you realize that, well, but now that I think about it, sometimes our SEs are a little bit reluctant, and they don't always. There's a little bit of distrust, and they think the AEs are just trying to close deals, and the SEs or the AEs think that the SEs are always trying to put up the brakes. And here's the interesting thing: if they're always getting along and everything's just sort of happy and cordial, chances are it means they're not having the difficult conversations. Yep. And it's the difficult conversations that actually make us better in the field. So I think and the fact that you said it really starts at the top, that's such an important lesson and such an important reminder. The SE leadership and the sales leadership, they have to be on the same page, right? And have the difficult conversations themselves. Incidentally, Semir, I'm almost having a hard time keeping it. There's lots of questions and comments popping up. I'm having a hard time keeping up. But there were a few that I want to touch on. We don't see who this came from, but I think this is an interesting question. And the question is, since you have Salesforce background, how do you see the future of Salesforce SEs who can stay with Salesforce and or move to other journeys? Obviously, don't want to put you on the spot, but whether it's Salesforce SEs or other SEs, this is a difficult time in the economy. We're almost on a weekly basis hearing of companies, letting people go. What advice or what comes to mind when you see that question about, quote, the future of either Salesforce SEs or other SEs?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, though. Thank you for that person who posted it. And I think, this is what the other person said as well, the constant change that we face as SEs. And I think that's what we need to brace for ourselves. I think with my background, what's really helped and how I kind of selected as well the current role I have is I was looking at where can I provide the most value. And I think I'm a big geek when it comes to value. But I was looking at my Salesforce skills. I've implemented Salesforce at Accenture, and I was at Salesforce. And I thought, well, Clari, what we do is sort of sales technology, revenue operations, kind of in that bucket. So we plug into Salesforce, pull the data out, and do a whole lot of amazing things with it. So that Salesforce knowledge that I had was extremely beneficial to Clari. So I knew from the get-go, if I get into this, become the first SE, I'll have a huge lot of value to add to the company. And, I'll be learning the product and the intricacies as I go. And that's, I think, where I see, a lot of the Salesforce SEs now in the market and within Salesforce and, other technologies that you kind of bring in your backpack of experiences, see how you can leverage that more. Because there's this sort of concept of compounding. Personal finance geeks all know that. But it's like, you build your career on skills you've already got, and I think it compounds over time in massive value. I would be a terrible SE if I went to be a SE for MongoDB or Zscaler, which are amazing companies, fantastic products, but I would be a terrible SE because I just could not leverage almost any of my previous experience in those roles. But if I go to a sales technology company like Clari from Salesforce, that is a much better fit, and I can leverage past experience and build onto that with my experience that I have right now. And maybe that's something to kind of think about it. It is, I'll just mention this story. I met a person 2 weeks ago kind of getting into the SE world and thinking about value that you can add. So that lady, she was a recruiter, or is a recruiter. She's recruiting, and she's recruiting SEs. So we've all seen people on LinkedIn reaching out to us, trying to fill a role, right? So she was that person, or is that person. And one advice or one idea I tried to give to her was, well, where can you add value? What do you understand now? And it's HR, it's recruiting. And there's a whole bunch of recruiting tech companies out there, HR tech companies. The Workday is the big one, and there's 100 small ones. That's probably where she really can add value already, because she knows the processes, understands the stakeholders, knows the buyers. And if she's a bit, tech savvy, she can learn those skills quite easily. Great communicator already, because it's practically a sales job. That is a great way for her to find the first SE role. She will not probably be lucky finding the first SE job at Okta and again some of these companies, because they're a very different space. but HR tech, that might be perfect for her. So that was kind of what I shared as an idea for her to see if she can land an SE job. And I think that goes back to, you know, compounding your experiences along your career journey.
Really good advice. But by the way, I'm going to challenge you just a little bit. I think if you joined a company like MongoDB, you'd probably still be a great SE. So, or you'd find ways to add value. That's just a hunch. In fact, Ron Whitson, who was on the show recently, we talked about SE skills that are transferable regardless of the industry. That being said, you make a really good point, and that is, I do think you sort of have to pick a lane, particularly if you're trying to break in for the first time. Like the example you gave, she's a that individual is a recruiter. Well, maybe you should talk to some HR companies. There was a gentleman who I was working with a few years ago. He had a background in mental health and was trying to break into pre-sales. I said, I am sure, I don't know of them, but I am sure there are technology companies that sell to the mental health profession. Right.
Definitely,
to me, you are an expert in that space, right? And that sort of fills that to me, that requirement of having a technology expertise. You've got to have some sort of technology or industry expertise. Again, you've got to have those people skills and then the sales skills. So really well said. There's another question that's on the board from Sierra. I hope I'm saying it right, Batia. And I think at the end of the day, this is the question is, how can we be better SEs with all different types of customers? I think that's really the heart of the question. And I'm even going to broaden that to how can we be good SEs with different types of account executives as well? Because the reality is that more than likely we're working with more than one AE. So, and they all have different styles, they have different personalities, they have different ways that they like to approach a customer. And to her point, her question, every time you walk in, what's the one thing that we know is going to be different every time? The customer, the people we work with. What comes to mind when you see that question, Semir?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you, Sierra, so much. I think, you know, it's right. I mean, if you sell software to companies who have, I have no idea what kind of systems. I mean, you know, it must be very old systems you're dealing with there. But, you know, what will be similar probably is pains. You know, pains of, you know, this takes too long, this is too slow, this doesn't do this integration, or this doesn't deliver that on time. And I think regardless of what the specific deep technological thing is that doesn't allow it to do, you know, you have the pains and you map that to how you can help from your perspective, right? Exactly. And I think that already will get you a long way to where you need to go. And then, yes, you probably just have to go through the pain of upskilling a little bit on the solutions as much as that's possible. But for that, you know, you probably have also experts you can reach out to internally, right? But as it comes to a pitch and to preparing a solution, you know, I think it's the pain, the deep customer understanding, that where they want to go, that really helps you. And you will realize that many of those pains are often, you know, quite similar, and it's just a different flavor of it, or comes in a slightly different shape or form. So that's sort of around the pains, and thinking about the partnership with the AEs, how you structure that discovery to understand the pains. Yeah, that's, you know, where SEs are also, you know, very many shaped, as well as how they kind of think with their AEs, how they come up with ideas. I adjust my style whenever I work with different AEs as well, because I try to see how they're working, what kind of ways of working they enjoy the most. But equally, they do the same with me, right? They know I'm pretty clear cut, little fluff, get to the point type person, and that's how they work with me. So yeah, no, then some of these work better and some of these work less better. Typically, from a leadership perspective, I try to map the AEs and SEs in a way that I think will generate a good collaboration, because they're sort of fit in that sense as well. Yeah, and that can get you quite far. So hopefully, Sierra, these are a few points to think about with your question.
Yeah, and you know, I love the fact that you mentioned pain, and I think it's, you know, whenever we enter a meeting or a conversation with a prospect or customer, we should be thinking, how can I add value to this conversation, right? And the way in which we do that is first listening, truly seeking to understand what are they trying to achieve or what are they struggling with, what are their priorities, right? Rather than coming in with our agenda, right? We need to clear our cache, as I like to say, right? And focus on the individuals we're dealing with. And look, if we don't have to be, we shouldn't expect to be experts in everything, right? It's okay for us to say, actually, I'm not sure about that. Let me find an answer, right? But as long as we have, I think, the right intent. And this goes that I used a word that I know is near and dear to your heart, which is value. I think a moment ago you said you're sort of a value. What was the term? Value junkie?
I know, like value geek or value.
Value geek.
About value, yeah, I know.
Yeah. Value geek. Well, and by the way, even when we're talking about interviewing with other companies or looking to progress our career, I think the more we can think in terms of not what can the company do for me, but what can I do for the company? Like, what value do I bring to the company? Right? If we emphasize there, look, we're going to be taken care of. So let's pick this idea of value apart a little bit further. People talk a lot about value. We talk about value-driven demos and value-focused demos. How do you talk about value, emphasizing value with your teams?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I mean, nothing will get sold, I think, especially in 2023, without some very strong case for value associated with it. And it's not rocket science. It's just simply making sure you articulate it, be that through the demo, you quantify it, be it with a business case with your account executive where you've done the discovery, and that will get you quite far already. It's not doesn't need to be yet another framework or complicated tool or something like it. It simply means, as I listen to a demo, I understand, what it does, what it solves for, what the value is. And it's very easy, I think, as a trap to fall into, to think, I've demoed this 10, 15 times already. I'll just kind of go a bit faster. Prospects maybe see this for the first time, or even if it's the second time, they won't remember because they see a million things happening every week. And that's where, it's important to kind of go back a bit and just think, what's really that we're solving for here? What do we understand from them? And how does it actually relate to their overall goals, the value we generate? And again, it goes back to AESC partnership, right? What we do is in our meetings, when we have a big pitch coming up, we always have prep meetings. That's been instilled religiously across the teams, which I'm very proud of that's worked. And we go through the slides that the AE presents. The SE critiques the slides, checks the slides, validates it against discovery we've done. And oftentimes it starts there where you anchor the whole pitch, maybe a bit too fluffy or not specific enough or not exactly how you understood in discovery. And if you anchor the pitch in the first full 5 slides that way, it's very hard in the demo then to kind of flip it around and do some amazing value story. Yeah. So it starts with kind of agreeing really what we're solving for throughout the entire pitch and coming up with a strong story around how you will help this specific prospect or customer that you're pitching to. So it's again, it's not rocket science. It just takes care and consideration and preparation to do it.
Completely agree. I want to dig into that a little bit further. Because you said that your teams have developed a cadence of always preparing. I guess the 2 questions that I have is, do they actually do that for all demos or for all meetings, or is it just the important ones? And either way, how have they been able to find the time to build that into their schedules or their cadence? Because a lot of the people that I work with, because Semir, as you may recall from my framework, I'm a huge proponent of discovery, prepare, practice, and then perform, right? But a lot of people I talk to, in the past couple of years say, honestly, Chris, I'm just running. I don't have enough time to do the necessary preparation and practice and even debriefing after the fact. So how do you and your teams deal with that?
That's an interesting question. I wasn't prepared for that one. I think you just find time. So there's 2 angles to it. So 2023, probably every single sales rep in the tech industry is not flush with pipeline. So it should be less of a challenge than maybe the last 2 or 3 years. At the same time, you really have to focus on making time, right? There's a lot of stuff that can be distracting in tech companies and generally companies. You have all hands meetings, office hours, lunch and learns, a whole bunch of stuff. And I think what we've gave permission to our reps is to not feel bad about not joining these or not joining the latest enablement session and just listen to the recording at 1.5x speed or 2x speed, and that gives you time back. But if it's not the deals you're working on, what is, right? I think it requires maybe a bit of a calendar audit to see for those who were actually struggling with it. Maybe a trap for the SEs, at least from a specific example, from what I've seen is, what I try to direct my team is focus your efforts on where you get the most bang for the buck, right? So yes, you can work on a small deal that has very sophisticated technical thing that needs to be prepared for a demo, or you might as well just throw in 2 sentences where you say, look, and we could do this, but it's a demo, so we haven't built this fully out, but we can address use case X, and that could be enough. So again, think about what do you need to build as an SE if the SE is struggling for time, and for the AEs, there's a whole other things like I've mentioned at the beginning that they could do to get more time back.
I love that, and I'm going to emphasize something that you said, which is we need to make time. We need to make time to prepare, and we need to prioritize things like preparing and practicing, because we do get busy, right? We are busy. We go back to back to back in so many cases. We've got to block off time. We've got to prioritize these things. So I think those are really sound words. Semir, I'm going to push our own pause button and invite anybody who cares to ask any questions or say hello. Folks, I'm speaking to Semir Jahic. He is the senior manager of sales engineering with Clari. Jason, my friend Jason Zekowitz says let's see, we should call those 3 buckets: process, partner, and product. Well said, Jason. So folks, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put them on the table. Semir, we wait for some other thoughts. I have something that I'm going to put on the table, and I wasn't expecting to talk about this until I saw the post that I think you put out today, which had something to do with the technical win. You said, I think, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you said average SEs focus on the technical win. Great SEs focus on closing the deal. Did I get that right? And do you care to elaborate?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this has just been sparked by a thought kind of a few weeks ago. Like all these posts, there's just like random thoughts that come to mind, and then you write them down somewhere, and then you flesh it out a bit later. And this was something where I really thought about our SEs and also some other SEs that I've been talking with. Are the SEs like, oh, technical win, done? Yes, they want it. They said they want it. And then you have a lost opportunity, 3 weeks later, and you think, well, I done my job. They said we want it, right? And I thought, well, that's just not the right way to think about it. The goal is not to get them to say, we want this, you're the best, Clari, Salesforce, whatever the case is. No, the goal is to have them sign, the DocuSign or whatever you're using as a platform, like the contract. And so, great SEs, I think they really care about the deal as well. One of my team members, he's monitoring the pipeline just like a sales leader would or a sales rep would, and looking at the deals, like, why is this not progressing? Do we need to do one more thing? Should I send them a differentiation email? Should I illustrate in a quick video what this use case is? Or should I follow up with my stakeholder, the technical side that I've been working with? That's the kind of behavior that makes him a great SE, because it's not just done the demo, they loved it, thank you so much, curtains closed. It's, well, okay, what else is needed? I'm watching this closely, and I'm really trying to help get the deal over the line fully. And I think that's sort of, every SE has got technical win. I think that's part of our, the job description for sure. But in the end, getting the deal done is what makes you a true equal partner amongst the team, amongst the sales team. So that's sort of what sparked that thought. I know, a bit provocative. I got a few comments on that. It's always good. But that was what sparked that thought.
I love it. And anybody who's read my book knows that I am actually a fan of the term technical win, because I do believe that our primary target is, or primary responsibility, maybe that's the right word, is to achieve the technical victory. That being said, none of us should be satisfied with achieving the technical victory. Satisfaction comes from closing the deal. And by the way, my definition of technical win is, at least partially, we've convinced the decision makers, or the decision makers have become convinced beyond any reasonable doubt that our solution is a worthwhile and valuable investment compared to all other options and the status quo, right? And usually if we get to that point, the decision makers have become convinced, usually the technical win now aligns with closing the deal. So I completely agree. And I mentioned this, I think, in your post, that I think there's an even higher level, which is our goal should ultimately be the success of the customer, particularly in this subscription-based SaaS world that we live in. It's not just good enough to close a deal, right? We want to, not only do we want to close a deal, but we want to see them succeed so that they continue to be a customer for a long time, right? That's the goal. So I think a big part of it is ensuring that the customer is actually going to be successful with our solution. When you hear me say that, does that ring true for you and trigger any additional thoughts?
Absolutely. I think I couldn't agree more. It's, that, technical win, it starts with that. The great SEs go for the deal win. But then I think what's so important, especially in the SaaS environment or consumption, usage-based consumption pricing, long-term customer success is so critical. It's, I think, a foundation that you build with the good discovery and good execution, articulating what the value is. But then yes, it's important handover. How do you hand over to professional services if they need to implement, to customer success, to account management, whatever the post-sales function is called? That handoff is often so broken, I think, because you chop it over the fence. Haven't heard that expression before, right? And that's just not how it should go, right? It should be much tighter collaboration, and it's something we worked on at Clari when we launched in Europe. It's something I've seen kind of being on the Accenture side, kind of the Salesforce implementation side. It can go very wrong and it can go extremely well, but it's a conscious process that people need to invest time and effort in. Because yes, otherwise, the renewal comes around the corner and you'll not be set up for success. And I think in an economy like this right now, you really want to make sure that customers are set up for success as you go into the relationship. And the SEs play a crucial part in passing on that knowledge and helping the post-sales team understand how they can make the customer successful, for sure. So absolutely agree with that.
Amen. How involved are your SEs in the long-term customer relationship? Do they work with CSMs to do additional either proof of concepts or demo, even after they're a customer? Or is it truly they hand it off and then the CSMs run with it and they're primarily focused on revenue acquisition?
Yeah, so how we're set up is the SEs are focused on revenue acquisition for existing and for new customers. So also on the existing side, if we're expanding
for new projects,
so that's where SEs help. That the CSMs, the customer success managers, they're technically enabled enough as well to do, I think, a good part of the job as well. That goes to realization of value and adoption. We most tightly collaborate right after the closure of the deal with the post-sales team, like the implementation services team and the CSMs, to really go deep into every single bit of discovery we've done, all the calls, the strategic goals, initiatives, technical hurdles that we've uncovered, so that they know not just here's the who and the economic buyer, but also know all the ins and outs of the actual technical details. And that really sets them up for success because they know what they're walking into. They're not just getting a project and that starts without much context. So I think that's what we've improved heavily, I think. And it's led to good success because we see customers renewing at a very high rate and buying even more of Clari. So, it's not a finished product, I think, ever. We've improved it certainly over the last 18 months here at Clari in EMEA. And it pays dividends massively once you have a good process in place to make sure the whole customer life cycle is a success.
100%. Do your SEs provide feedback to the product teams as well? I know that's something that a lot of SE leaders are talking about now, is not only the handoff to customer success, but the feedback to the product teams. Are your teams doing that?
Yeah, so we do provide feedback to product as well. I think on the acquisition side, on the new logo acquisition side, it's probably quite ad hoc. I think it could be better. I'll be honest. Nothing is ever perfect. I think we've started introducing better processes over time. So we have a decent feedback loop now, but it's not as fluid as we want it to be. It's much more fluid in the existing customers because you didn't actually know gaps you have.
Right.
Because in pre-sales, before they even have the software, it's a bit more ambiguous. It depends on how they implement it, how they really structure it. It could vary. So I think the product feedback loop, we have it. It's improved from a spreadsheet to a bit more something machine-like. But I think there's still some way to go to be actually machine-like.
Are you using any other management tools? There are a number of pre-sales management tools, oversight tools out there. Do you all currently use one, or do you mostly just use your CRM? And then you mentioned spreadsheet, whatever you happen to have, at your easy disposal.
Yeah, so of course we use Clari. I use Clari a lot. That helps me track things, of course. On the backbone, there's like Salesforce. On the product feedback, it's a product board. We've introduced that through Slack integration to give feedback. That's been quite a good introduction as well. What else do we use? We got Salio in place more recently for support on the demo side. So it should be fun. And that's, I think, that sums up the text. Of course, video recording. I think there's different solutions for that. And that's mainly it, right? So it's again not rocket science necessarily. There's not a magical tool that will help you be this enormous value seller. But we're exploring different avenues, and I know there's many exciting companies working on demo automation. I advise Demoboost is one company that I help with, and there's all the others in the market as well. So it's really exciting actually to see the space evolve, because it will help make our lives as SEs a bit easier, because we don't have to do generic demos and we can go deeper on some of the demos. And it will help the go-to-market teams, the AEs and CSMs and even marketers do more. Because showing a product and the value that it can bring is just so powerful. So the more we can give this to people, the better.
Indeed. Semir, let me press the pause button again, folks. I'm speaking with Semir Jahic. He's a senior manager of sales engineering and operations for the EMEA team for Clari. And I know we've had quite a few folks, Ron Whitson piping in, Jason Zekowitz piping in. Guys, thank you so much. If any of you else are out there, care to ask any of the questions, we'll be here for another 15 minutes or so. But by all means, please do. Semir, I want to pick apart the comment that you made to me a few weeks ago. And you said, in essence, you said, Chris, we can't sell the way we did 2 years ago. What did you mean by that? And what do you think, what is it that we need to be doing now that's different?
Yeah, I think we've seen this all, right? I don't want to reiterate the million LinkedIn posts we've seen, how to sell to the CFO, all that kind of stuff. But it is exactly that, right? You're selling to different decision makers, stakeholders in your sales cycle. So whilst whatever software you have, so in Clari's case, we sell to sales leaders and sales operations leaders. We also now have to sell to CFOs and procurement people, like actually have to demo to the procurement person, which we would have not done, I think, 2 years ago. And the same goes for all the other types of software you're selling. You had your key stakeholder 2 years ago. Today, you have those key stakeholders plus maybe 2 or 3 others who just need to know what you're doing and why you're doing it and what the potential value of that is. So with that dynamic, the whole sales cycle changes. How do you do that and do more with less? Fewer SEs may be available, fewer AEs. So it's all about getting to the efficiency. Thinking about, again, we talked about demo automation on one. Thinking about where you invest the SE's time, where you get the most bang for the buck, and that's just changed fundamentally from a few years ago. Also, that the messaging, I think when you think about, there's this kind of description of tools in startup land. There's like a candy, a painkiller, or a vitamin. And, what are you in that tech stack? How do you differentiate your solution? And how do you articulate the value? Where, cash might have been flush 2 years ago and people said growth at all costs. This is how your software helps. Today, it might be a bit different. So you have to adjust your style as well. If you're selling the same software you sold 2 years ago and your pitch still sounds the exact same, I think you probably are missing a trick. And I think there's potential in adapting that to the current times and just going deeper and understanding these other stakeholders that are involved.
That's really well said. And I think I think we have to understand more than ever, or certainly, more than recent time, that comes to mind for me, is the risk that everyone making a purchase decision is taking, right? Every time a decision maker makes a purchase decision, they're putting their reputation on the line. They're putting the organization at risk. And so I think the more we can do to help them mitigate the risk, and the more we can do to let them know that we understand the risk that they're taking, and we're going to, if not eliminate, at least address and mitigate that, the more successful we're likely to be. Again, does that resonate with you, Semir? Does that strike a chord?
Yeah, it's absolutely got to do with risk, and it resonates. I think, I mean, it's always a kind of an interesting example. 2 years ago, we might have pitched, you get Clari and you don't need another analyst to run your data, sales data and do the reports. Today, you really have to think about, if the person chooses to spend 100,000 on your software, it's between that and maybe laying off another person, because it's just fundamentally changed the game. And so you have to be sure, because like you say, they're putting their neck on the line. They really have to assess what will the company need to be successful in 2023 and beyond. And you have to have a very strong point of view on that as a vendor, so that the buyer also is bought into that vision and really understands it and can articulate it internally to CFO and the other stakeholders. And I think it just has to be so much more robust in 2023 than it might have been, 2 years ago.
100%. There is a question, and again, we don't see the name. Any advice for new SEs, less than 6 months experience? I suspect you and I could probably talk an hour just on this, but anything come to mind immediately, Semir?
Yeah,
advice for someone who's been doing this 6 months?
Yes, congrats on getting into the SE role. It's an amazing job, amazing profession to get into. So well done to the person who posed the question. I think just immerse yourself into everything pre-sales, into your organization, learn everything and anything you can. Don't just be limited to the SE role and work. Talk to the reps, talk to others in the organization. Learn as much as you can in and outside of your organization. That will make you a great SE, I think, to start with. And then just have fun.
Yeah. Well, and something that comes to mind for me as well, Semir, and this is one of the first things that we talked about, it's get to know the sales reps and the account executives that you're working with. Spend time, ask them questions, ask them what they look for in a sales partner, and let them know that you are committed to being a strategic partner in sales. You're committed to helping them close deals and the team close deals. I think that's where it starts. I think we need to embrace. A lot of new SEs struggle with this idea that we're in sales. So we need to come to peace with the fact that we're in sales. And rather than looking over there at those AEs like they're sort of, the other people, right? The other team, like we need to come together and really embrace that relationship and that partnership. So that's something that comes to mind for me. And by the way, folks, love these questions. There's a question from Sean Kuntz. Integration with third parties to be compelling. What techniques have you used to manage procurement and maintenance of these parts during or in the demo infrastructure? This probably is a perfect question for you, because I'm guessing, just having a little bit of understanding of your platform, you probably your people probably have to include or demonstrate integrations with other platforms. So how do you handle that in the demo environment?
Yeah, Sean, what a wonderful question. I think that's where you get into the weeds of sales cycles, and there's no easy answer, at least for us. I mean, when I'll tell you how we do POCs. Well, of course, there's like a demo environment. And like I mentioned, we're starting to use Salio as well. And these demos can be very compelling already. So the magic here is, can you tell the story without the story being perfectly reflected on your screen, which I think is something I do as a quite lazy SE sometimes. because you can, if you like a magician, just point to the right things that you want them to see and want them to understand. You can get quite far without, actually technically integrating things. The other thing is, if you actually have to do integrations, like we integrate Salesforce, we take out the data and put it into Clari and then show them how things work. Yeah, that can be hard, right? I think always be proactive and be transparent on like security and whatever other parties you're interacting with, because that gets stuff done. We have our sales reps share all the security material right after NDA is done, because we have to get through security if you want to do the deal, but also if you want to do the POC. So they are proactive, they're trained on sharing the material, and if questions do come back, we can address them. But that buys us time rather than do your qualification call, do the NDA, do 3, 4, 5 other things until you then start a security review. So we run not a like strictly linear process, but we run parallel streams in a sales cycle, right? So the sales rep kicks that off, and then I make sure I own the security review through the end, so that we can then actually integrate in real time and then show some value during the demo. So that's I think one thing, and then just be transparent as well, because again, they might say, what data are you using? Why are you using that? Is that GDPR compliant, or is it this or that? And just be super transparent about it, because it will come out sooner or later. So I think it just really helps being proactive and get through any issues or challenges that customers might have. And it will also build trust as a byproduct, I think, very quickly. It really also depends on the solution you're selling. So that's just our use case. So there might be like a million different ways to look at it, but hopefully it gives you at least some context, Sean.
Some things that come to mind to me, Semir, as well, is let's make sure we understand who it is that we're talking to and presenting to, and the stage of the sales life cycle, if I can use that term. One of the mistakes that I've seen people make is they'll dive deep into how an integration works and some of the specific nuances, the nuts and bolts, and they're talking to higher level decision makers early in a sales cycle, right? The decision makers probably don't need to see the details of how the integration works, right? Yeah. They just need to know that it integrates, right? And the value. So again, this is one of those things where know your audience and know what's, and how important is it if you're talking to the administrators, right? And these are the people who have to maintain all the different things in their tech stack. They may need to go deep. So I think we need to be very careful about when we talk about integrations, how we talk about integrations, and to what extent. So anyway, good question. Semir, we are rapidly running out of time. We got a few minutes left, but we will land this plane on time. I know you're in England, so it's getting late in the day for you. Any final thought or anything in particular that you thought we might touch on, or you were hoping to share with the group that maybe we haven't touched on, either around the AE-SE partnership, value? Because there's one thing that we haven't touched on that I'm going to ask you about, but before I get there, anything else that maybe you thought we would discuss that we haven't?
I think we touched on many great topics. It's been a fun discussion, I think, and you clearly kind of been reading through my posts, kind of picking up on things I'm passionate about, and I hope it's been useful for the audience. We try to look at a few questions and address them. I mean, I love building stuff, right? Building a team, building a company, building successful customers. And a lot of it comes down to not necessarily just the hard skills. They're just a means to an end oftentimes. And it comes down to the people skills you have, the solutioning you can do, the value you can articulate. And I hope the discussion has been helpful for all the people attending. I'm more than happy to connect again with anybody. And yeah, so what's your remaining topic? I've had a good time so far.
It just strikes me that one thing that we haven't really talked about is discovery. And so I'm just curious how involved your team is in discovery, and is there explicit discovery conversations with clients, or do your teams do a little bit? People talk about disco demo. Do they do more sort of the disco demo type stuff?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the product you're selling and the buyer you have. If you can do disco demo, I think it's probably one of the more controversial topics on the sales engineering. Should you do disco then demo, or demo, no disco, or a bit of a mix of the two. Your discovery is hugely important. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm truly understanding the customer to articulate the value, the preparation. I mean, all this stuff is discovery. I was just thinking about this today where, what as an SC, do I just wait for information to be presented to me and what the AE wants to see in a demo and discuss that in preparation? No, I mean, I do my own research on every single opportunity before I go into the first prep meeting with the AE. I will say, I saw this on LinkedIn. I saw they have 2 jobs open for this type of role, and this was their last press release. And I try to come with a point of view as well. And this is how discovery starts, right? You kind of outside in first, and then you go into the weeds with the customer to really understand them. So that's so critical, I think. And yeah, without discovery, you won't really get anywhere because it will not resonate. And it's not truly something that solves a solution, solves a pain, a solution. It's not value if it's not valued. It'll only be valued if it's relevant. And for that, you need discovery. So yeah, mega important. I think, there's way too much kudos given to people for great demos and way too little kudos given to SEs to do great discovery, because the demo is a shiny thing, right? It's like, getting that commission check as a sales rep, but it's nobody tells, the sales rep, amazing, your 5,000 calls you've done to get your pipeline filled. Nobody claps their hands for that, but people clap hands for checks. And I think discovery is similar. Everybody loves a good demo, which is fantastic. But, good discovery is the foundation of that. It's very important.
Well, and as you were speaking, I found myself thinking, I'm really convinced that almost no one buys software or invests in technology because the demo was pristine and perfect. They invest in technology when they recognize how the solution can actually help them in their business, and how they can see themselves using that solution to help them achieve what they're trying to achieve and solve their problems. And the only way demos are relevant to the individuals that we're presenting to is to get some context, is to get some information, right? And that's always in the context of discovery. So to me, it really is the most important part. I believe discovery is the most important part of our job. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be a discrete conversation, right? It can just be, let's just ask it before we dive in, can I just ask a few questions and, get a sense for, who's in the room, what your priorities are, et cetera, right? So excellent. Well, Semir, it's been an absolute delight. I'm seeing all the comments from Tim and Sean and Yauri and Ron and others. So apparently others have thought this was a pretty good conversation. Sal as well. Safe to say that you're more than happy to have any of the folks who might be online to reach out and connect with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll find me on LinkedIn, hit follow, click connect, and, more than happy to continue the conversation. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, Semir, thank you so much for being here. I told you earlier, I'll tell you again, you're wise beyond your years, and it's a pleasure to have gotten to know you a little bit. I look forward to crossing paths with you on more than one occasion in the future. Wish you the best this year, and I hope you'll come back and be a guest again.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. All the best. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers. And folks, those of you who hung around, thank you so much for joining. Or if you happen to listen to the recording, thanks so much. Please be sure to follow #TechSalesAdvice. And of course, you can go to the website, techsalesadvisors.com, to learn more about me and the business I run. Semir, hang around just for a second. I'm going to give you your parting gift backstage. Everyone else, cheers. Have a good day and a good week.
Bye-bye.